Hi, my name is Doug, and I want to share with you 7 ways that I think the world is changing that impact the way that we do and think about mission. The first thing I want to say is that when we think about Christianity today, so often I hear people in the church talking about the decline of Christianity. They've read the recent Pew study that shows that in the United States, something like 34% of people identified as unaffiliated, which means that they don't belong to Christianity, they don't belong to any religion, and instead they're sort of not necessarily believing in anything. So that's been disturbing news for Christians in the United States. We also are aware of how Christianity has been in decline in Europe. But if we look at the globe as a whole, if we look at the world, Christianity is booming globally. In fact, we are living through the greatest coming to Christ. We're living through the greatest Great Awakening, the greatest spiritual revival that we've ever seen in the history of Christianity. And so the question is, now is really the time for us as Christians to be engaged in mission. But the question is, we need to look at these 7 ways that the world is changing and think about how that changes the way that we need to engage in mission. So the first is that Christianity is shifting but not declining. In North America, Christianity is declining, as I said. In fact, even evangelical Christians, which are usually considered to be the highest growing group of Christians, are slightly in decline. The percentage of Christians, evangelical Christians in North America, as a percentage of the population, has grown by about 1%. But if you look at the numbers, the numbers have grown, but as a percentage of the population, Christianity, even evangelical Christianity, has declined slightly in the United States. Mainline Protestant Christianity has declined significantly. It's gone from about 70% of the population to less than 18% of the population today. Catholicism has grown as a result mostly of immigration, but the overall picture of Christianity in the United States is that it is in decline. And so that's been shocking for some people to realize. But if we look at what's happened to Christianity in the global South and the global East, it is increasing by massive numbers. I'll give you an example. In 1910, something like 4% of the world's Christians, under 4% of the world's Christians, were in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, roughly 25% of the Christians in the world are from sub-Saharan Africa. There's been enormous growth in Christianity in sub-Saharan Africa. The fastest growing region now is in Asia, in the Far East. Christianity has grown tremendously in the East, and also in South America we're seeing growth in Christianity. So Christianity is shifting, but it's not declining. The locus of mission is changing. It's from, we used to think of mission as being from North America and Europe to the rest of the world. But now really mission is from everywhere to everywhere. The second point is that there's this global movement of people that's happening at a massive scale. There are more people displaced on the earth today than ever before in human history. 244 million people in the world are living outside of the bounds of their country of origin. That's unprecedented. You know, we've never seen anything like that before. 244 million. So that's larger than most nations, than the population of most nations. And what we're seeing is a movement of people from the east and the south to the west and the north. So there's immigration in Europe and in North America at high levels. And so this is connecting us directly to people from other nations like never before. In the United States, we've always thought of New York and the East and the West Coast as being kind of centers of immigration. But now you can go to almost any community in America, almost any town, and you'll meet people from all over the world. Right here in Grand Rapids, we have people from so many different nations in Asia and Africa, all around the world. So the world has come to us. The third is the growth of Islam and the growth of and the changing landscape of religion. Now, I don't want to say this. I myself worked in a Muslim majority country as a Christian missionary for several years, and I don't want to say this as a way of fear mongering. So please hear the statistic accurately. The growth of Islam, according to the Pew study, by the year 2050. It's estimated that there will be 29.7% of the global population will be Muslim, and about 31.4% will be Christian. That means that by 2050, there will be roughly equal numbers of Christians and Muslims in the world. If you look at this, the Pew study, what you notice is that there's a change in every religion in the world over that period of time until 2050. Most world religions will be in decline in relation to the growth of the global population. So there'll be a 35% growth rate in the population on planet Earth from today until 2050, 35%. What's interesting is that Christianity almost exactly keeps pace with that population growth of 35%. So there'll be enormous growth in Christianity, 35% growth rate over that period of time. Almost every other world religion is predicted to decline in relation to that 35% population growth. Islam is the only world religion that is predicted to double in size, and so to actually grow twice the amount of that 35% growth rate. Now, there are a lot of things that could be said about that. Part of the reason for that is that a Muslim majority nation considers all of its citizens to be Muslim, regardless of whether or not they would consider themselves to be Muslim. So the way that we're counting these numbers is always needs to be questioned. There's also going to be there's a greater birth rate today of Muslims than there are generally of Christians, and so there are a lot of assumptions being made in this projection also. I also need to say as a Christian that as someone who's lived among Muslims for many years, it's incorrect to say that Muslims are inherently violent. There's a whole lot that could be said about that also, but I grew to know and love and care about my Muslim neighbors when I was living in Arabia. And so we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that more Muslims means more violence. That's a very complicated story, and we can maybe do another video on that sometime. But basically there will be this growth in Islam in the world in relation to the other world religions. And so what that means is we need to be able to articulate the uniqueness of the gospel and the uniqueness of Christ in relation to the world's religions, and in particular in relation to Islam. Christian-Muslim relations means that we as Christians, from a place of deep rootedness in the gospel, need to be able to speak to and to witness to and to be in good relationship with our Muslim neighbors and with the people of all religions. So understanding how to approach interfaith in a way that is that maintains our understanding of the uniqueness of the gospel is really important. One of the things that I did in my last role was taught Christian students about how to relate to other religions. And I was sometimes surprised that our students didn't always have a good grounding in their understanding of Christianity. So that's another one of the ways that the world is changing, and something that we need to do in mission. The fourth point is that the growth of the internet and the use of smartphones is increasing. So in 1995, 1% of the global population was connected to the internet. Today, about 40% of the world is connected to the internet, and it's predicted that within 10 years, 90% of the world is going to be connected to the internet. So what does that mean in terms of how we relate to the world and how we connect with each other? I'm going to give you an example that I think wraps a lot of this up and answers how we can kind of approach mission in a new way as soon as I finish with this list. The fifth is urbanization. There's a global movement of population away from rural areas and to urban areas, and we're seeing these massive mega cities develop and are predicted to develop in the next several decades. And also those cities are likely to be more cosmopolitan, so there'll be people from all around the world living in those cities. Also, we're seeing a huge youth population increase. As the world develops, as the world deals with issues of poverty and begins to develop medically, there are more children that are living to adulthood. So that's great news, and it means that there's this massive youth boom happening. In North Africa and the Middle East alone, 70% of the population is under the age of 24, something like that. I mean, it's a huge percentage of the population that's considered youth. And then the seventh point that I want to make is that there's always been persecution of Christians around the world. We're continuing to see persecution of Christians. It's something that's actually promised in Scripture, that as Christians we can expect to face persecution. We're seeing that it's harder to get visas for missionaries in some places. There are more visa restrictions. And so one of the things one of the ways that I think mission is changing, I'll give you an example. We have a pastor of our churches here who's working with an immigrant population. And there's a church planter in that immigrant population, a pastor. And this is a Nepalese Nepalese immigrant population. And that church is, the church here is supporting that Nepalese, getting to know that Nepalese community, and then sending that church planter back to Nepal, where they already have a visa, and they're able to work with and recruit church planters in Nepal and to run trainings in Nepal for church planting. Actually, they're doing some of those trainings here in the United States using the internet. So there's all sorts of ways that these changes affect the way that we think about and do mission. There will always be a need for North American missionaries to serve in places where there are people that have or what we consider to be unreached people groups. But so there'll still be a place for missionaries to be sent abroad. But again, the location of mission is changing from North America and Western Europe, from here to there. It's changing from that from everywhere to everywhere. So these are just a few of the points, and we could make as many more things we could say about changes in the world and how mission needs to change in response to the changing world. I hope this has been helpful, and wishing you blessings on your ministry and mission, and may God go with you in all that you do. Thank you.